Every once in a while, and I am loath to admit this because I have walked through airports in Dubai or recently Austin, and I forget because I've lived in this town all my life just what a spectacular dump from a Banana Republic our airport is in Miami. It can't be an airport that isn't, excuse the double negative, the worst airport in America.
Oh,
I disagree.
Oh, sorry, Billy Corben, to trample you on your segment. It's good to see you again. Not really.
What else is new? The Jew is back, baby.
You cannot be serious.
Samea.
Back at you.
You cannot be serious. Happy Chinooka. You cannot be serious with Miami as the worst airport in America. And you were a beat writer, man.
I hate it. I hate it so much.
I don't hate it either. I'm with Mike.
No, it's not at all. Like, there are certain aspects, like when you get down to like D60, holy shit, on American.
I had to.
That's a third world bus station down there.
I had a tent, a canteen, and a camel that I needed to take from there after the Metro Mover train.
Yeah, I'll grant you.
That's not even in Miami anymore. That's like Naples.
Miami International Airport, to me, in our lifetime somehow, is one of the most improved airports that I can remember in this country.
Progress.
Yeah,
it represents
agree.
everything that this fair city has tried to shine to all of its immigrant population. This is the American dream. This is real progress.
Remember when Fort Lauderdale was the locals airport? MIA was a mess. It was for tourists, and the locals, we'd all schlep to Fort Lauderdale because it was like quieter, it was cooler, it was cleaner. I think that's totally reversed, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Fort Lauderdale got way too big for its britches. There's nowhere to expand, and now there's just a million more people in the same amount of space that we had before. Whereas MIA, I feel like, listen, is it a mess? Is it hard? Yeah, it's tough, but it's also like one of the busiest airports in the country, if not the world. And I think it's actually better than it was when we were kids.
It's also an American hub. And I did not know this about airports. For the most part, dedicated terminals, it's incumbent upon the airline to make that nice.
Yeah.
And spend money.
Well, American is stuck in the 1980s. Like there's no disputing that. That as an airline, God, I mean, American as an airline hurts me about what has happened to my vision of this country since I was the age that I discovered American.
It's like a symbol.
They're stuck in. I had such utopian ideas about what this country was back when I was flying American in the 1980s. And they've stayed right there.
I had utopian ideas about what this country was before the TSA existed. And I think that the fact that the TSA still exists, like this far after 9/11, is a joke. That's a bureaucracy that just should not ever have existed, and certainly should not exist anymore. And just think about what the airport experience in this country would be like without that. I'm not suggesting no security. I'm suggesting that mammoth bureaucracy.
Just stuck in the middle of everything.
Pawing our grandmas, our shoeless grandmas in the middle of the airport in some sort of security theater.
A TSA agent made me cry when I was in 6th grade at the Orlando airport. They made me take my belt off, and my pants were too big. And I was like holding up my pants going through security. It was so humiliating. I was like crying.
That happens to me all the time.
I'm sorry.
Just naturally.
You were in the 6th grade when the TSA existed? Jesus Christ.
I was in the 2nd grade, actually.
Wow.
When
You like the Miami airport, though, Jessica?
I'm used to flying in and out of O'Hare and LaGuardia, which O'Hare is like a gorgeous airport, but it's so busy. It's so hard to get an on-time flight out of there.
You want to talk about being stuck in an era. O'Hare has been unchanged since Home Alone.
And JFK and LaGuardia, they're barely, it takes 4 hours to circle that airport.
But LaGuardia has gotten, LaGuardia's gotten a lot better.
Depending on which terminal you're in. But getting to and from LaGuardia, from a major city like New York City, getting to and from LaGuardia is so hard to do. It is ridiculous. Same with JFK even. And JFK also has the same thing as Terminal D at Miami, where if you get out, I actually timed this once on my watch, how long it took me to walk from the end of Terminal C at JFK or Gate C to the baggage area. It was a 0.7 mile walk. And I think of all this through the frame of my mom, who is disabled and uses assistance to get around airports. I'm like, it would take her 45 minutes to get from one end to the other unless we got one of those carts to take her there. It's crazy.
And LAX makes MIA look like Opelika. I mean, LAX is a mess for a major city.
Okay,
airport.
so you are all of you are more pro Miami Airport than I am.
I've been to some podunk airports. Let me ask you guys a question, since we're reveling in bad airports. You ever been in the real shit? I'm talking about Kansas City.
No, why?
Have you ever?
Why?
No.
Why? Why would you? Why would you?
I'm a Browns fan. I told a bunch of Chiefs fans, see you in January, and that blew up in my face. But Kansas City, I was told, whenever I would complain about Philadelphia, which has super low ceilings, super antiquated, and really scary-looking people. I'm just going to say it.
My mom was almost grounded at Philadelphia because she was when I was a kid, she was flipping out. Yeah.
It's like one dude looked like the bad guy from Scary Movie with the small hand. Swear to God.
What a reference.
Yeah, Chris Elliott. But he looked like
I love
straight
that.
from that movie.
I love Chris Elliott.
The My Germs guy. Yeah.
Chris Elliott makes me happy.
Yeah. There was another dude that looked just like Benjamin Franklin. And I know what you're thinking.
Because Philadelphia.
I know what you're thinking is Philadelphia. And also, that's not too far away from Chris Elliott's character in Scary Movie 2. But it's a look over there that people go for. It was startling to me. But Kansas City is, you want to talk about stuck in a time, it is the future as envisioned by Dom Draper. Like, it is all the Jetsons. You have to hop on a bus to go to different terminals. They're all carbon copy. You hop off the plane. There's 5 feet, a half wall, and then the doors. It is insanely tiny. The car rental, since Miami's always working on its infrastructure here, as the Palmetto is perpetually under construction and the 836 is always under construction, I at least have seen people talking about infrastructure and it mattering there. So I never really got why the infrastructure bill is so important until I went to Kansas City.
The reason I bring all this up, Billy, is because Miami Airport is in the news this week.
And because you love observation. What is with these airports?
I'm telling you, just go for fun. If you really hate a shitty airport,
Kansas City.
Go to Kansas City. It's Mecca.
You can imagine the Dubai airport, though, correct? When it's a land of just money. I was just sort of coming through. Everything is made of money there. They have these sprawling buffet breakfasts for everyone who are there. There's just beds all over the place. Like it is not anything like MIA.
But unlike maybe perhaps Kansas City, a place like Dubai, a place like Miami International Airport, the airport is the money because the economy is the airport. You have major international business and tourism economies that rely on this. It is the driver of the entire county's economy. And with that comes, of course, cronyism and corruption and everything you would expect when you have an economic force and, of course, a captive audience. Because remember, if you're a retailer or a restaurant or a business inside an airport, you have your way with those, with the passengers, with the travelers, because where are they going to go? Buy a bottle of water, buy a meal, buy a book. I mean, you have a captive audience there. And so the airport in Miami for at least 20 plus years, since Alex Penelas was mayor of Miami-Dade, has been like a mecca of corruption and cronyism.
And this week, what is happening this week that merits your attention as you suck vigorously from a sugar-free Red Bull that you just belched into the microphone?
By the way, I don't want to let the cat out of the bag, but the only supply chain issue that I have noticed, other than like paying a little bit more for gas, which happens, is the 8.4 ounce cans of sugar-free Red Bull are extremely scarce in the marketplace right now.
You know, I got a nice little relationship with Red Bull because I am an addict. And they send me cases of Red Bull. That's why that's there.
It's amazing.
I'm your hookup.
My dealer.
I'm your pusher.
Well, one of the things, Pusher Man, that you are addicted to, because you are. This has happened.
I was addicted. I didn't realize that. I was like, man, why am I so anxious? What is this anxiety? And it's because I was doing 11 Red Bulls.
Caffeine cowboys.
No, but Mike, addicted people jump from addiction to addiction. Michael Irvin taught us this. When he was talking about sex, and then it was yoga or competition. Like he had to be addicted to the one thing that he was addicted to. You've transferred your Red Bull stuff over to being somebody who cares deeply about being a Miami Hurricanes insider and being a mover and shaker. Like you have now become addicted to moving and shaking. You are moving and shaking in circles where powerful people reside and power is brokered. He is now addicted to that.
At the airport?
I want to talk to you about the airport. I want to talk to you about the airport and the corruption.
One time I sat in front of Jake Garcia's parents. I was like, yeah, let's talk.
you've been listening to people. Since we first talked about this 2 months ago, I think both of you are allowed to be right in that Billy said that the University of Miami administration didn't care about spending very much, but since then, it seems to have cared. Now, Mike has been reporting that Julio Frank, all of a sudden, this is embarrassing to me as somebody who cares about the school and the region, that the president of the university wouldn't know that football is important until Kirk Herbstreit told him on ESPN. That's a breach between all the departments on campus, that the president of the university doesn't understand the history of what the school is to the people in the market enough to know that, hey, you could care about this thing that also is a precious resource that will make you money if you invest money in it. The idea that Kirk Herbstreit has to explain that to him is offensive to me.
He was aware of the history, but he knew it as history. That's the problem.
If I may, like he knew the football program was important because they're synonymous. I think he kind of got that. What he was alerted to by Kirk Herbstreit was that they weren't paying attention to it enough, that they weren't giving it resources to compete, certainly within its own conference and certainly on the national level. He thought what he was doing was right, and that's really an indictment on the athletic director who never pushed him, who never made ass, who just was angry behind the scenes because he wasn't getting things he wasn't asking for. So there was Billy was right in saying, Mike, you're so naive.
You're living in the past. They don't care. They don't care enough to actually compete.
Where I bucked against Billy was like, well, I can change it. I think I can change it. And I kind of think that this show kind of did. This show did with
Roy's laughing.
I don't think Roy was laughing at Mike, although many people in the audience might be.
I happen to know this show did. I happen to know that. I happen to know that people that are influential within that program right now, and it's a lot fewer than it used to be, we're really taking to heart the stuff that we were saying, the stuff that got aggregated by Barry Jackson that went into that Kirk Herbstreit diatribe. If you listen to Kirk Herbstreit on Saturday, you weren't surprised by what he was saying because you heard that very same shit here. I do think that they get it, or at least the right people are engaged right now. But you were right to highlight the attitude there because that was the attitude. I'm just feeling a change now.
I think what happened was, and I remember I was talking to someone in a local government in Miami-Dade County many years ago, and she was new to politics, newly elected, and it's a little nothing town where nothing much happens, and suddenly they were engulfed in scandal out of nowhere because the Herald was covering and doing a great job of covering a major scandal in this municipality. And all of a sudden, a problem that they were all well aware of in the government but doing nothing about was front page news, and then they were forced to do something about it. And what she said to me is, she said, a lot of times we need to be embarrassed into doing the right thing. And I think that Mike's right about that, is that what happened, whether what he was saying or what I was saying, and I think there, like you said, there's room for us to both be right. And then all of a sudden, we weren't the only ones noticing, but ESPN was noticing, the country was noticing, just the laziness and the lack of investment and the lack of motivation on the part of the administration and the frustration of the fan base. And as it turns out, the frustration of college football in general, because college football is better when Miami's better, is the bottom line. It's good for business. And so when suddenly ESPN is broadcasting what we've been broadcasting all this time, I think they were actually embarrassed into doing the right thing once and for all.
Yeah, and we're a bunch of Canes here, so we're going to say college football is better with Miami, and I'm sure there's plenty of people like Alabama that are like, no, we like it just fine the way that it is. But Miami rates still. That college game day that was done at the Miami campus, they still talk about it glowingly like it was their favorite experience ever, and that rated. They want to be back down here.
Yeah.
They want Miami to be front and center and in the national conversation. It's good for their advertising dollars. Yeah. It is good for the sport.
Miami and FSU should be prime time every year. I don't care where they're ranked. I don't care how good it just should be.
I mean, you can make the argument, no joke, because there have been times on both sides, I think, where somebody can put up a 56-0 on a team on probation. But this year's FSU was about as sad as any I've seen going in, with both teams, Manny Garcia in his final stages and FSU, the worst FSU team we've ever seen in our lives. And so to have it fall to that level was something that perhaps it can rebound from now because it can't get a lot lower. I mean, even during the Ryan Clement years, one of the sides is good. It's not both of the sides kind of stink, but the airport thing that I wanted to get into with you, because one of the reasons that we're doing, you and I specifically, what we're doing in this Miami Hour is because the politics around here have been so corrupt, and we keep losing fights, Billy. Like everything it is that we're lamenting, we continue to lose. Like this Ron McGill's precious
Calusa.
Yeah, precious Calusa, this environmental area that he wants to protect because he's someone who cares about animals and the region.
Precious Calusa. Also Ron's drag name. Precious Calusa.
Put it on the poll, please, at LeBatard Show. Should Ron McGill's drag name be Precious Calusa? Can you guys help me?
Rookery.
Can you help me understand, like, the losing of these fights before we get to the airport stuff? The losing of the fights, when you know you're going to lose the fights, are they not less worth fighting when you know you're going to continue to lose the fights? There's nothing you've advocated for here in these weeks that hasn't blown up in your face, and you knew it was going to blow up in your face. You knew you weren't going to succeed with change. You were just going to succeed by informing people.
Well, I mean, do you fight the fights that you can win, or do you fight the fights that are worth fighting? I think that's the question. Ultimately, what life are you gonna live? You know, I remember when Dave Sampson said to me once, Dave, it is Dave, by the way. Dave Sampson said to me, when are you going to stop fighting these fights that you can't win? And I realized to myself, geez, Dave, like the second he decided that was how to live your life was the moment he needed therapy. Because then you can't look at yourself in the mirror anymore. You can't sort of, you're saying like my ideals and my values I'm going to abandon in for what? For the fights, like for the bets I know I can win. And that's not the point. The point is to tell the truth. The point is to dig in where it's worth digging. I mean, as we speak right now, there are bulldozers now knocking over trees in that Calusa development, which they're not supposed to do. The mayor, Daniella Levine Cava, promised it wouldn't be done. The commissioner, Raquel Regalado, promised it wouldn't be done. They promised Ron McGill. They promised the entire community, and they're there knocking over trees and natural wildlife habitats.
The mayor called Ron McGill this week and said that was not a battle that she could win, that she was going to lose that one, because even if she vetoed it, that the commission could then just come back and do it anyways. Yeah,
they had a veto-proof majority against her, but then that becomes the issue. Was she going to abandon her commitment, her ideals, her promises to her voters? I include myself among them.
You voted for her.
I endorsed her.
You are disappointed by her.
I'm profoundly disappointed in her. She is living proof that you do not change the system changes you. And that is what we've been witnessing. She has surrounded herself with horrific people, with snakes. I mean, literal wolves in the henhouse in the form of Jimmy Morales, her COO.
Not literal, but I got what you're saying.
In the form of Christian Olvert. She has all these political creatures, some of whom are corrupt, some of whom are racist. If you want to know what's wrong with the city of Miami Beach, Jimmy Morales was the city manager for 7 or 8 years here. It's why this place is going to shit. It's why it's nothing but a real estate hustle. It's why corrupt police officers, instead of good cops, were protected and promoted, is because of Jimmy Morales. Jimmy Morales is being sued, as we speak right now, by the ACLU for censoring black artists. Jimmy Morales tried to bring back Jim Crow laws to Miami Beach. Daniella Levine Cava hired him day one as her COO, in charge of major duty in economic engines and public-facing groups like water and sewer, like the airport, like the port of Miami, for crying out loud. This guy's in charge of things, and they're in her ear, and they are destroying this county, and they're destroying this woman's career politically, because they're solidifying her as a one-term mayor, is what they're doing, which will set back the Democrats and set back progressive politics in Miami-Dade County by decades. That's what she's doing right now as mayor of this county. What happened?
How can you go from being having that kind of conviction, endorsing her, thinking she'd be good, to disappointed that quickly, beyond the superficial smear of the system changes you don't change the system?
Well, first and foremost, you are who you keep company with. You are your staff. You are who you hire to advise you. And she's hired snakes. She's hired snakes, people who have been poisoning this community with corruption, with racism, people like Christian Olvert, people like Jimmy Morales. She brought them into the county government people who never should have been there in the first place, people whose track records alone are disqualifying for any position in county government. She brought them in. So I knew almost immediately the mistake that I had made. Here's the thing about that, though, because people like to throw it back in my face. You supported and endorsed Andrew Gillum. You supported and endorsed Daniella Levine Cava. I did, and I stand by those decisions now. If I had to replay those elections all over again, I would make exactly the same recommendations and endorsements. And the reason is that you got to play the race you have. You got to pick the best candidate in that race. The most important thing is, though, is you have to hold whoever wins to account. I don't care what party you're in. I don't care if you supported them or endorsed them. That's the thing. Politics isn't a cult. You have a race. It was Esteban Bovo versus Daniella Levine Cava. You give me that ballot again today. After what I've just said about Daniella Levine Cava, I still vote for Daniella Levine Cava.
You make it sound so hopeless, though, because I know, but Billy, because I asked you, and who do you recommend here locally this time? And you're like, oh, good God, all of these are bad choices. You're just again and again making the best of terrible choices. You said that what you were looking at this year was as bad as you'd ever seen it.
But I didn't think, to be fair, that Daniella Levine Cava was a bad choice. In fact, I said, not only do I endorse her, not only am I voting for her, but I'm proud to do it. I will tell you, I'm no longer proud to do it. If I had to do it over again today, I would certainly hold my nose and vote for her because she's still the best candidate in that race. But with Democrats like her, who needs Republicans? I mean, that's the truth. Alex Penelas, I called to account for his shameful display in 537 Votes, our documentary that we produced with Adam McKay for HBO. We called him for the mess at the airport. All of the same cronies of Alex Penelas to this day have contracts at the airport. He made them all rich, and they all donated to his campaign in 2020. He lost, but I'm looking at what's happening at the airport literally this week. And Daniella Levine Cava is basically selling out to all of those same cronies of Alex Penelas from 21 years ago. And I'm thinking to myself, why didn't I just vote for Alex Penelas? What difference would it have made at this point? I mean, she's coming in and she's not, nobody in the county is playing her game. She's playing their game. So when she promises Ron McGill, like, oh, I'm playing 8-dimensional chess here in county government, that's bullshit.
Well,
they're running circles around her in County Hall.
For the record, and I don't know, I've just talked about this with Ron privately, so I hope I'm not betraying a confidence here when I say that that she called him and that he's not going to be fooled. He's going to continue to hold people accountable, but that this one was a no-win proposition for her. She wasn't going to win, and that therefore there were fights down the line where this battle might be something that could be won.
So I understand the philosophy of the political capital issue. I understand that what she said is that I'm not going to veto it because they're going to override the veto like that. She's not wrong about that. She said I'm going to put in additional environmental we'll call them safeguards in place.
Yeah, clauses to make sure that we are extra. I mean, McGill's going to be watching them, and you are too. The
problem is a contract is only as good as the party's willingness to enforce it. And as we're speaking right now, the developers, they're knocking trees down, which we were told yesterday or whenever, or last week, that they were not going to do. So immediately, that's bullshit. Immediately, County Commissioner Raquel Regalado is a liar. Immediately, Miami-Dade County Mayor Daniella Levine Cava is a liar. So now what? What are we going to do? We're going to keep bitching about it is what we're going to do, to try to shame them into doing the right thing.
Well, she only called McGill because there were thousands of email in her inbox
over 5,000
from our listeners who are just trying to fight for something or to continue to fight for something, even though, like I said, Billy, they're all losing fights. Like these, you need leadership that's willing to not just listen to its constituents but be moved by it. Like that seems fundamentally broken throughout government.
I've gotten some really nice DMs and private messages and things from listeners from all over the country who have never been to Miami. They have no interest in Miami. They don't know anything about Miami, but who are listening to these segments and are getting more energized and more activated about getting involved in their own local government. Because let's be real. While Miami, I think we are the masters at corruption down here. We didn't create it, but we have perfected it. There are equivalents to some level of a lot of these characters and a lot of this chicanery in whoever's listening, wherever you are. There are problems in your community.
It can't be this bad in many places.
I agree with you, but the point is to get involved, because every 4 years Americans get a little bit more interested in politics at the national level when there's a presidential election. The problem is that what happens in Washington, D.C. today does not affect you necessarily tomorrow. It might take days, months, years for it to ever kind of trickle down into your daily life. But I assure you, what is happening in your local governments, what is happening at City Hall, what is happening in your county governments, what is happening in your state houses and legislatures and governor's mansions, that affects you every hour or every minute of every day. We're talking about traffic. We're talking about trash collection. We're talking about police, infrastructure. So we're talking about schools. This is all local.
Airports.
This is all local. You flush the toilet. If the toilet don't flush, you don't call the president, right? You call your local water and sewer. That is a local government. That is a county or city operated entity. And so the point is that this matters. This matters every single day. Is it exhausting? You bet your ass is exhausting. Is it even more exhausting when you lose? Yes, absolutely. But it doesn't mean you shouldn't do the right thing. And that's the thing with Daniella Levine Cava. She thinks that she's trying to convince people. Not just Ron, but she's always trying to convince people that this is some sort of a game that she's playing. She's horse trading. She's horse trading her ideals, her promises, her values in exchange for some future win down the road. That hasn't happened. She's not winning anything. She's being outplayed every step of the way. So when she promises some future benefits or some future wins here, she's not being honest with us, and maybe she's not being honest with herself because she has so many bullshit artists and corrupt people surrounding her. If she continues to listen to this bad advice, she's a one-termer.
Many of the people listening right now who have grown interested in politics locally, Florida, or outside of Florida, don't know just how much you know about the Marco Rubios, about the Alex Penelases. You can do some of the stuff that you've done with Xavier Suarez and with Joe Carollo, with a lot of people who have been historic politicians in this market. I wanted to ask you more Penelas questions because I thought your film with McKay for HBO, while extraordinary, and I was grateful that it told Miami and Cuba's viewpoint through showing everybody, as you say all the time, that this America that we're in now, that 20 years from now is going to be the rest of America, that what we're going to do is just keep welcoming this stuff in and again. The Penelas stuff, I thought you were going to go even deeper on. I don't know what you're willing to say here, but Penelas seemed so very compromised in a way in your film, seemed so compromised that I thought the other side had something on him. Like, I thought it was so overt back then that I wanted to know more about, like, how does Alex Penelas go from Miami's sexiest next politician that can get all the way to the White House to, oh, no, this guy was just totally bogus from the very start.
Ego. And what's interesting is that 20 years today, if Alex Penelas was Alex Penelas then, now, he would get much further. The empty suit goes a lot further now than ever before. But he was People Magazine, America's sexiest politician. He was basically Marco Rubio of the Democrats. He was a Barack Obama type figure. Before any of these guys really existed. He was this inspiring, young, handsome minority.
New brown American demo. Yeah. Here comes whatever Marco Rubio was supposed to be before he started shaking hand with the water. Like, this guy was one of the original golden boy politicians who's going to Latinize international America through our wonderful city in Miami.
Beautiful young family. He was the strong mayor in one of the largest and most diverse counties in the country. He solidified the Cuban American and the Cuban exile power base in Miami-Dade County. That is, I mean, you could really look at that at his first election, and his re-election is sort of the solidification of Miami as a minority-majority community. It's incredible. Even now talking about it, it's incredibly exciting and historic and incredible.
I remember living it, right? I remember thinking of Penelas as a Cuban boy. I remember thinking of him as like, oh my God, a golden chance in this country for someone to aspire. I guess we're about the same age, so I wouldn't have been a young boy, but I think of myself as he was such a child, right? He was so young to be doing that. And I just remember as I became an adult, like, wow, how disappointing all of that was. And I thought your film hit it pretty hard to explain, oh my God, he was vacant. Like he wasn't there to fight for anything.
Anyone, yeah. Not the Cuban American community, not Miami-Dade County. It was tragic, and it was classic hubris. It's one of the most legendary fatal flaws in the history of drama and politics. Isn't necessarily such a fatal flaw anymore. People who are solely grifters, who are in it for themselves and their own, seem to get a lot further these days than they did back then. But that was the problem. He wasn't doing anything for anybody other than what he could do to further his own cause. And that was problematic 20 years ago. Again, if he's a character now in history, he might very well be Marco Rubio looking to make another run at presidential politics. He might very well be a Donald Trump. For all we know, a man who could become president despite the fact that he cares little or nothing about anyone other than himself. Sociopaths are getting a lot further in American politics than ever before.
What do the people need to know about our airport situation?
Don't fly into Kansas City, apparently, is what they need to know.
It's not that bad, is what they need to know. It's just not that bad. That should be the slogan.
But better. But not as good as Fort Wayne, though, right?
Oh, Fort Wayne, Indiana, a gem of the Midwest. I'm going to tell you something. If you're ever visiting America's heartland, you're going to want to land in the Fort Wayne airport because you know what you get when you get off your plane, Dan? A cookie.
No.
Hey,
everybody?
Everybody.
What is it, a
cookie.
DoubleTree? What is this?
They give you a cookie.
That's my idea of heaven. Everyone gets a cookie?
When you deplane?
Everyone gets a cookie.
I want to fly there right now.
It's like a lay in Hawaii. They give you a cookie.
That's fantastic. I love it. I
don't know what the rules are in the pandemic world. Before the pandemic, cookie.
If Miami gave out everyone something while they were deplaning, what would it be?
Cocaine.
Croqueta. Oh. I think we're both right.
How about a coqueta?
Yes, there you go. A breaded cocaine. Yes. So the airport this week, though, what do people need to know about the moving and shaking and shifting around the airport politics?
It's just the latest example of the failure of the Daniella Levine Cava administration is what it is. Just an absolute, her just like finding all the voters of hers that she can and just grabbing knives and stabbing us in the back with both hands. It's crazy. What her administration, this is an administration who already has rehired and advocated for additional contract extensions for the company MCM, which is a construction company with a very highly politically connected figures. In fact, the owners are the cousins of Carlos Jimenez's wife. So Carlos Jimenez, our former county mayor, currently United States representative, it employed both of his sons at various times in different positions of lobbying and executive positions. And they built the FIU pedestrian bridge that collapsed and crushed several people to death. And they have a $70+ million contract still at the Miami International Airport that this week the county commission voted to extend on the recommendation of Daniella Levine Cava and her COO, Jimmy Morales, who is head of water and sewer among all these other departments in the county, has hired them to build bridges, again in the county, has hired them for various multi-million-dollar contracts in the county.
Billy, how?
And now extending, because they donate to everybody, and they are literally, when you say like, oh, who's Tio is, like it's like when
who's
people say
uncle?
Who's uncle or who's cousin or who, like that's literally what we're talking about here. And meanwhile, Jimmy Morales, who also runs the airport, his department. Jimmy Morales has recommended, and Daniella Levine Cava has recommended that they listen. We all know the pandemic hit airports hard. It hit travel hard, and it hit retailers and restaurants in airports pretty hard as well. And so, but you have to remember, a lot of these businesses, while revenue was cut by basically 50%, a lot of them got PPP loans A lot of them got rent relief from the county because the county is the landlord for these businesses. But here's the other thing. These businesses have been in the airport for 20 years since Alex Penelas gave sweetheart no-bid contracts to all of them. And now she wants to give them all no-bid extensions. What does that mean? Not only do the same people make the same money, but there's no turnover, meaning like you don't get new restaurants.
No competition. Nobody's trying to get better.
Nobody's trying. Exactly. And here's the other thing she wants to do. She wants to eliminate there are price controls, let's say. And people do this at airports all over the country. What they do is they basically say, because you're a captive audience, right? They basically say you can't just charge like a movie theater, whatever the hell you want for kernels of popcorn and soda water or sugar water. You have to be reasonable. People need to have access to reasonably priced water and food. And so they have a reasonable system by which to control that. Jimmy Morales went to the county commission and lied to them about how we're one of the only airports in the country. 100% bullshit. He finally had to admit it. He said, we did an analysis and found that we are one of the only airports in the country that limits, that has certain pricing regulations.
He wanted to flatly gouge.
Yeah, and lied to the county commission about it. Daniella Levine Cava, sent Jimmy Morales, this racist, corrupt henchman, to go lie to the county commission to convince them to allow these retailers, who are all major duty players, they all have major duty lobbyists, they all donate major money.
Because he wanted to charge $54 for a pack of Lifesavers?
Whatever that. He says, we'll let the free market decide, which is I understand the spirit of the thing, but here's the bottom line. Nobody at the airport is entitled to their business model. I think we've seen a lot of businesses go out of business over the course of this pandemic, okay? None of them are being bailed out by the government now. They got PPP loans. If you could find a way to stay afloat, you're still in business. But the idea that the government has to come in and bail these people out now, post-pandemic, well, by the way, revenues are you can look at the airport right now. I don't think anybody's suffering at the airport right now. Now, they were having problems hiring people to come and work at the airport. And so what they were able to negotiate, the one concession, but at what cost, is to bring in the $17 an hour minimum wage to airport workers. The funny thing about that is, while we need a workforce that is better compensated in this county, especially in this county. The problem is that they can't get anybody to work anyway, which means that they need to increase so this is a win-win-win. Not for the taxpayers, not for the travelers through Miami-Dade County. This is a win-win-win for the businesses, the private businesses, and the special interests at the airport who have these no-bid contracts, who are going to get them extended for a great many years. And what are they going to do with that extra money they're making? They're going to make it rain, as they always have, on Daniella Levine Cava and the county commissioners, who will give them this sweetheart deal.
Okay, that is all horribly sad, and there's nothing that can be done to stop it. It's just so, and that's so about the airport, and so it won't be any better. You guys feel a lot stronger, a lot more positively about the Miami airport than I do. I really do. I'm embarrassed that it hasn't improved more over the last 30 years. To me, it feels more and more in sections like I'm walking through the Caribbean. And I mean, though, that is no insult to the Caribbean. It just feels a little bit too like, hey, we're not trying the way that the rest of America is to continue to improve some infrastructure in a way. Like the way when LaGuardia committed itself to improving its airport, the commitment was obvious. Like it wasn't grifted on by local businesses and these contracts that you're talking about. Like LaGuardia, I thought, improved a hell of a lot more than Miami did. I'm embarrassed by our airport.
There's a New York Billy Corben right now screaming his head off at you about that comment. Like, New York politics, I don't think are a bastion of honesty and like black cronyism.
Oh, I'm just saying LaGuardia is nice. It looks nicer to me. It looks like it's improved more in the last 20 years.
The bar was so low. Like, it was so bad. Yeah. And it's still a nightmare to get in and out of there, which is the most important part.
And so bad for so long. Whereas, at least like Miami, I used to say Miami International Airport should be like, their signs should always say permanently, "Welcome to Miami, pardon our dust." Because it's been under construction for as long as we've been alive. And in that regard, not only has it been a money pit and it's been an extraordinary boon for politicians and their cronies and for corruption, but they have been improving it on an ongoing basis. It was LaGuardia, which just sat like a mess for decades. And finally, like, okay, we finally have to do something. But Miami, at least there's been a consistent, and again, you cannot possibly, when growth and tourism are our only business, that's our sole economic driver. When that's the case, Your airport is going to be constantly growing. The number of airlines, the number of passengers is going to constantly be growing, and there's literally no way to keep up with it. There's just no way to keep up with it.
Billy, good talking to you again this week.
But
Thank you. It was,
you seemed despondent.
Well, I mean, look, every week it's more hopeless and helpless news. I'm finding it invigorating to try and take up these losing fights with you, but it's dispiriting to, hey, you got all these signatures for Ron McGill and the mayor called, and yeah, they're still knocking down the trees and it's still developers. Everything's for sale. Everything's for sale down here.
Dispiriting to you, Dan. You made me move here. How do you think I feel listening to this?
I know.
I want to leave you, though, with this anecdote. I'll let Roy cut it out later. But why we do this, why we fight the fights worth fighting as opposed to the fights that we can win. All the President's Men, one of the classic movies, I think it turns 45 this year, about Woodward and Bernstein, who at the time were unknown bylines at the Washington Post. Started on this story about this peculiar little low-rent, third-rate burglary at the Watergate Hotel, the Democratic headquarters there, by a group of Miami Cuban exiles, in fact. And Robert Redford, how he became interested in pursuing this story was before the book All the President's Men was even written, before the story itself even played out. The burglary happened in 1972 in June. In July, Redford was in Florida, always a Florida connection, promoting his new movie, The Contender, where he plays a guy in California running for the Senate. And he, as part of promoting that movie, he does a whistle-stop tour on the back of a train going from Jacksonville to Miami. These famous, you see the presidents on the backs of these trains. One of the most famous of those cars, the Ferdinand Magellan, is now at the Gold Coast Railway Museum right next to Zoo Miami here in Miami. The famous Dewey defeats Truman picture was taken on the back of that train. So long story even longer, Redford is traveling with entertainment press, but he's also traveling with a bunch of political press because they're covering the Democratic primary candidates that are on the train doing this whistle-stop tour. And so he is talking with him, goes, what is this burglary thing that happened in, he was no Nixon fan. What is this burglary thing happening, the Watergate? And they all kind of like looked at him knowingly and basically said, listen, we know this goes right to the White House. We know that. And he's like, well, then why the hell isn't this a bigger story? Richard Nixon is running for re-election in November. They said, well, really for three reasons. Number one, they did both sides of them. Both parties, these are dirty tricks. Both parties engage in dirty tricks. Who cares? Number two, they said McGovern, who is the lead contender for the Democratic nomination, he's going to self-destruct. And Nixon is going to win re-election by a landslide. And none of us want to be on Nixon's enemies list as a lame duck, because that would be a dangerous place for us to be. And number three, more Americans this summer care about whether or not Hank Aaron is going to beat Babe Ruth's record. So who gives a shit? And he was incredibly disheartened, as you are every week that we do, because Miami segment. But then he started following along Woodward and Bernstein, these two guys nobody ever heard of, who would not let this go. Even when they screwed it up in November of that year, they got it wrong, one of their stories. They kept going with it. And he said, that to me is the story. And where did they keep going with it? They kept going to the possible impeachment, but then the sudden resigning, the resignation of an American president. Because
they stayed with an unwinnable fight, or they stayed as nobody. If they had stayed at nobodies and not fought, that story never comes to light.
And I can't tell you how many times I hear the same shit from the press, local or otherwise, what's the difference? He's going to win re-election anyway. She's going to win re-election anyway. Who wants to be on their bad side? The public doesn't really care about it. First of all, I disagree that the public doesn't care about it. And someday, not only are we going to be on the right side of the thing, but we're going to be on the winning side of the thing.
Billy, good talking to you. Talk to you again next week.
Go Canes.